right, Lindsey, what's in your lens today?
All right. For years, the podcast charts have been in a stronghold by conservative pro-Trump voices. I mean, Joe Rogan, Ben Shapiro, Sean Ryan. Trump even leaned into this lane during the 2024 campaign, bypassing traditional media in many instances for appearances on these shows. But something interesting is happening. In the first 6 months of Trump's return to office, the Meidas Touch podcast, a pro-democracy, anti-MAGA show, by most accounts hosted by the Meidas brothers, has been ranked #1 a few times across major platforms. On YouTube from July 21st through the 27th, Meidas Touch topped the U.S. podcast chart. From June 7th to July 7th, Podscribe clocked it at 124 million views, more than triple Joe Rogan's podcast at 39.2 million views. Still high, but not as high as the Meidas Touch. Rogan slipped to 6th so far in August. Meidas is still holding steady at the top of that chart. That indicates to me a cultural turning point, one that reveals a growing hunger for alternatives to MAGA talking points, even among audiences who once leaned right. And here's where it gets interesting. The very voices that built up Trump's online influence are turning on him. For example, Rogan, Andrew Schultz, Tim Dillon, mainstays of the anti-establishment manosphere, have called out Trump's recent policies. Take a look at Andrew Schultz.
I voted for none of this. He's doing the exact opposite of everything I voted for. Yeah. I want him to stop the wars. He's funding them. I want him to shrink spending, reduce the budget. He's increasing it. It's like.
And let's not forget his shady handling of Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not letting this go. Joe Rogan said he's drawing a, quote, line in the sand. Take a look.
This one's a line in the sand. Yeah. Because this is one where there's a lot of stuff about, you know, when we thought Trump was going to come in and a lot of things are going to be resolved. Yeah. We're going to drain the swamp. We're going to figure everything out. And when you have this one hardcore line in the sand that everybody had been talking about forever, and then they're trying to gaslight you on that.
It turns out Joe Rogan's not alone. A UMass Amherst poll found that 70% of Americans disapprove of Trump's handling of Epstein-related info. Nearly 2/3 think his administration is hiding something. This is a glaring vulnerability. Here's the opportunity, though. Democrats have reportedly been trying to manufacture their own Rogan in recent months, spending millions to find someone cool enough to break through. But that kind of voice isn't made in a lab. It emerges organically when the message matches the moment. Right now, the Meidas Touch brothers are meeting that moment. Their rise shows that pro-democracy, truth-telling voices can dominate a digital space if they're bold, consistent, and most importantly, real. So here's the punchline. Trump isn't just losing liberals, he's losing and irritating his own base. That's the disillusionment. It's just Democrats' biggest opening if they show up with substance, not just vibes, not ads, real policy, real engagement. It's time for Democrats to stop trying to copy the culture and start shaping it by supporting authentic platforms like the Meidas Touch podcast and engaging with audiences across the aisle. Even Rogan went from Bernie to Trump. So voters can shift even if they're given a reason to, or most importantly, if they're given a reason to.
Well, I totally agree with you that the Democrats' approach to the podcast space has been all wrong in trying to manufacture these voices of trying to have Jamie Harrison or people who are really part of the establishment be those leading independent media folks. And what Meidas Touch has to their benefit is that it is an organic growth. I do want to exercise some caution about the numbers. Just looking through, I did notice that they are posting upwards of 10 to 15 videos a day, whereas Rogan's posting one a week. So I think it's possible that they are getting a lot of views on each video, but it might not be unique viewers, whereas each Rogan video has a higher total count, but they're posted less often. But that being said, they're obviously doing well. I've done media hits with them before. I think they're talented communicators. And we'll see what happens with these podcasters who were ostensibly for Trump ahead of the election and now are kind of frustrated with some of these stories.
And I think the thing is, and what I want to make clear, because I really do like Joe Rogan's podcast, and I most importantly like him because he just does what he wants to do, meaning he's not trying to be a journalist. He's not trying to be aligned with any political party. He just does what he wants, which is most Americans, right? I think that most Americans fall somewhere in a wide middle and not on the fringes. And so he's that person. And I think Joe Rogan could actually be the Democrats' Joe Rogan if they presented actual substantive solution. And that is kind of the bigger point, is that it wasn't that podcasts are just trying to be, some voices were intentionally trying to put out a political message. Some people will look at Fox News and say, okay, they intentionally set it up to be that type of media outlet. But I think there are a lot of podcasts that literally just came out to say, do we have to just accept what we're seeing in most places and criticize? And I think if Democrats listen, a lot of the party has been criticized, from Joe Biden to even being the candidate. The first time was one thing. The second time was another thing. Why? They're not listening to anyone, and let alone the young people and the people who watch podcasts, which are the future of the country. And so that, to me, is the biggest opening, to actually take the time to listen and figure out who, because Joe Rogan going from Bernie Sanders to Trump is very extreme, but who most represents something that you can stand behind, something that you're interested in. And I think when you have people that are just willing to be authentic and say, hey, I have some room for nuance in my thought process, just somebody who I think is going to take the country in a new direction and break up some of that bureaucracy. That's what people want to see. That's what people want to hear. And I think that Democrats are wasting way too much time not having figured that out by now.
Yeah, and I think that was a rather common trend, too, that Bernie to Trump pipeline. There was some research that suggested that Bernie Sanders supporters were more likely to support Trump over people like Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris. And actually, there's a lot of overlap with AOC and Trump supporters as well. It's sort of the horseshoe theory of right and left populism, right? Your other point about the Democratic podcast, how it's about listening to people. I think that's really important, because when I saw that the Democratic Party was doing the Speaking to American Men initiative,
oh my gosh,
it's like, no, you guys don't need to workshop how to talk to men. You need to listen to men and hear what they're telling you.
And that's the biggest issue. Speaking at people has been happening my whole lifetime. You know, I think that's part of the reason everyone thinks that because you voted one way, you have to vote down ballot. As somebody who lived in Arizona under Senator John McCain, loved him. Somebody who's lived in Philadelphia, somebody, you know, I've lived across the country and had leaders that I'm interested in for certain reasons, because they seem like, first of all, their moral fiber is set, and then the way that they govern seems like the way forward for the place that I'm at. And I think that that is really important. For podcasts provide a space for that. I think when you're watching traditional TV, it's kind of like pick a side and stay on that side. But I don't think that the younger generation is going down ballot on anything anymore. They're like combing into who these people are. People on podcasts are researching more than I am, you know, not even they're like, oh, I actually found this from 20 years ago, this soundbite. And I think that's amazing, because also they're holding people's or candidates to the fire to say, who are you for real? Based on the history of your life and everything that you've said, who are you? And they want to know, what will you do seriously, not, talking a good game, but what will you actually implement in the coming years? And they're looking into that, and I'm actually happy about it.
What I really like about the podcast space, in addition to the deep dive into issues and candidates' histories, is that they offer an opportunity for candidates to be humanized to an extent. They talk a lot about things that you typically wouldn't hear in a cable news interview. Just going back to Trump's Rogan interview before the election, for example, he was talking about what his most inspiring moment was the first time he became president, and he talked about going into the Lincoln bedroom and feeling sort of the weight of that history and how awe-inspiring it was, and really how cool it was. And you don't often hear Trump talk about moments where he's caught off guard. He's usually like the guy in control and the guy in power. And so it was really fascinating to kind of hear that personal side of him, which you don't usually get when he's sort of battling with the media.
And I've noticed that Pete Buttigieg has been doing a good job of just making sure that he's out and about and having conversations. And I also think it's important to be able to criticize your own party while you're on these podcasts, but also argue for what was done correctly. And I think Pete Buttigieg has been doing a good job balancing that, but also embracing people that felt cut off by the party in the past. And so that is also a strategy when you have 3 hours or 2 hours to chat with someone that you can't possibly do in 5 minutes on cable news, which is why both should exist.
Yeah, there's obviously some Democrats who get it. Buttigieg doing the Flagrant podcast with Andrew Schultz, Gavin Newsom doing the Sean Ryan show. And those hosts actually got kind of criticized for that by some of their viewers.
Just by having them on?
Yeah, but it's like, you got to do it, right? I mean, the governor of California wants to come on your show. Of course you're going to interview him. And look, there's a lot of criticism of Gavin Newsom, flip-flopping on issues, maybe on some of these podcasts, or changing some of the things that he's been for. But the fact that he's willing to do it obviously speaks to how media savvy he really is.
Like Brene Brown says, get in the ring. Don't throw stones from outside the ring. Up next, a New York Times analysis is now concluding that the only reason Sydney Sweeney's outrage was a thing was because of conservatives. What? We'll be right back.